How y'all doing this evening? Sorry, I was running a little late, but we're doing a standard Q&A straight through because I always say, oh, I'll get to the comments or Q&A later. And I think instead of trying to rush through the discussion and stuff and then do it, why is this thing off centered? Yes, don't touch nothing. So anyway, I decided I'll just, because I used to do, if you go way back in my channel, I used to just do Q&As straight through um, and just open up out the gate. And I think a lot of times I feel like that's the only way to really, because I get a lot of questions throughout the week. And then I tell myself, okay, when people inbox me or DM me questions, I'll save it and do it. But I never do, you know. So anyway, I did want to say something before I said something, though. So I'm going to share the link. But before I get into the link, I don't know if you're familiar with this quarter zip debate. And it's funny because I don't know. Y'all have to let me know if I really need to tell y'all, because I didn't know they were called that. Because my thing is, I love sweaters. I love sweaters. But I think sweaters can only have buttons. I think it's sacrilege to put zippers on sweaters. But that's my personal choice. That's my preference, as I say, you know. And I have an aunt who buys me quarter zips every, you know, if you got somebody that every holiday, every birthday, every occasion they have to get you something, they're buying you clothes, I think they're telling you they don't like how you dress. But that's, again, that's my own issue. No, I haven't. I have not retired my cardigans. I think I had one on last week, didn't I? No, I'll never. That's my thing. It's like a fuzzy hug. So no, the short answer. But anyway, I been watching this quarter zip thing. So anyway, there's this trend. So, and I'll just give you a quick overview from what I know, is that you have this phenomenon called YNs, and YNs are basically black men who are in the streets, gangs, gangbangers, hustlers, drug dealers, and ne'er-do-wells. Now, this trend about black men has been going on since the era of Reconstruction, because black people in the United States can't just exist. You know, it's something that is lost on us when they talk about inalienable rights. Black people's rights, our identity, our status, everything that makes us human in this country was legislated, was pushed through constitutional amendments, laws, and through enforcement of policies. So when this country was founded, the founders of this country, the enslavers, the colonizers, the genociders, says that man is endowed by God. Man's rights men are endowed by God, by our creators, and these rights are God-given. At the time that was codified in the United States, we were not human, we were not men, we were chattel. So the rights that are codified in the U.S. Constitution didn't apply to us any more than it would apply to a mule or a cow. And even when it was brought up to the court in the Dred Scott decision, they said the black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect. And so our rights are a byproduct of legislation. Their rights are a product of God, are ingrained in the very fabric of reality, the rights of white men. So with that being the established understanding that we have accepted, that they have imposed and we have accepted, when black people exist, we have to have a point of existence. You know, the whole idle law, the vagrancy laws. So after chattel slavery, during slavery, every black person had a purpose. Every black person existed for the enrichment the pleasure, the entertainment, and comfort of their owner, of their white owners, and for the white society as a whole. After we were emancipated, they was like, well, what do? We were the Negro problem. What are we to do with the Negro? Are we to send the Negro back to Africa? Are we to make the Negro equal to us and make the Negro a brother in Christ or a full citizen? There were several debates as to what to do with the Negro that we weren't really fully a part of. So we all know that it's written in the history. They settled upon that we would occupy a place in society that was above slavery but below citizen. And in that place that was above slavery but below full-blown citizens, there was a hierarchy in there. You had your sharecropper, and then you had your top hat and tails Negroes like W.E.B. Du Bois. So, but the one thing we couldn't be is just be. We couldn't just be. And so that goes all the way back to the vagrancy law. So if a black person is standing around doing nothing, they're suspicious. So they would pick up black men off the streets. You couldn't, and even here in Chicago, my first and last direct interaction with the Chicago police, I was in a meeting with some other brothers about some things. After the meeting, we kind of spilled out onto the street, and we were standing on the street corner just talking as we were dispersing, and the police rolled up on us and were like, you can't loiter here. Even now, there are loitering laws, vagrancy laws. So a black person that is not being seen as doing productive labor, if you're not doing productive labor in transit to or from productive labor, or somewhere that you are sanctioned to be, either you wearing a laminate or a badge or a uniform where you're allowed to stand here, just being a black person with nothing other to do but existing in open space as a black person, it becomes a problem. You become a threat, you become a trespasser, and white folks all over the internet in 2025 come up, what are you doing here? I don't see a mop in your hand, I don't see a rake. Or hell, and then some of the sophisticated Negroes was like, I don't have a mop or a rake, I have a briefcase. There was just this video I saw a couple of weeks ago of a judge. And the judge came in on his day off in some casual clothes and went and sat at in the judge's chambers, and then came out and sat behind the bench in the courthouse. A black man, jeans and t-shirts, or he had like a sports jersey. And one of the bailiffs came and was like, what the hell are you doing here? And he was like, oh, you're going to learn what I'm doing here. And so with that understanding, you have this concept of a YN. Now, I'm an old man. I'm much too old to be even a YN category. But in my youth, I had the same. They have different names over different generations. Inner city youth, urban youth. And they had this concept called wilding. And I was in New York at the time where they were saying black people would just form hordes of blacks. And why? That's the whole Central Park 5 case was based on this thing that black people in New York City, young black youths in New York City in the late 80s and early 90s would just get together in these hordes and wreak havoc across the land. Super predators, thugs. So today, that is now a YN. And YNs are young people who are standing out in a space, not doing productive labor, or just existing and not producing wealth, entertainment, pleasure, or comfort for white folks, or supporting those who do. And so you have this whole YN phenomenon. And then they show young people with guns. Now, if you ever travel to God's country, to Middle America, to the Bible Belt, to the open country, white youth have a much greater obsession and infatuation with guns. White youth all over the internet are producing content with guns. And when they don't have real guns, they go to these paintball parks and conduct mock warfare. But it is not criminalized. It is not demonized. It is not deemed, because Also, if you go to poor white areas, white youth are also forming gangs. There are even suburban gangs. But this YN phenomenon has penetrated the consciousness and realities of all people. I live on the south side of Chicago. I go out of the country. I go anywhere and I have to use my ID, or if anybody finds out I'm from Chicago, they're like, oh, Chicago. Chicago. Yeah. Because everybody in the world equates violence, gangs with Chicago. Right? And so this YN phenomenon, black people oppose it as if the problem with young black people is not the problem with young black people, young black men in particular, is not the systems and institutions of white domination. Is not that they were born into a society that deems them expendable, that deems them not surplus labor, but lumpen population that hold no intrinsic economic value, no intrinsic social value, no intrinsic cultural value. Not a population of youth who have been targeted by every institution and segment of society for exploitation and or suppression. So when you look at the wayward black youth, the problems of wayward black youth do not start. The origins of the problems of wayward black youth do not start with the black youth. And anybody that tells you they're going to help black youth without going to the source of the problem, to the enemies, to the predatory institutions that create these black youth, they're not being serious. You know, you want to save the chickens, and you tell the chickens how to properly cluck. And you tell the hens, don't just be laying all these eggs all over town. Get married before you lay eggs. And you never pay attention to the slaughterhouse. So this YN phenomenon is nothing but a continuation, going all the way back to the vagrancy laws, to criminalize, to demonize blackness as a whole, and young black males as a group. And to somehow not just target black youth for pretty much conducting themselves identically to any other targeted and devalued population throughout this society and throughout American history and throughout most human civilizations. They say, well, we want the black youth, if you just stay in school, we all been subjected to that same shit. There used to be a program here that called me out. I came out and did some work with them years ago called Becoming a Man. And they would go to these at-risk black youth and tell them how to be a man. And there used to be these programs for young black fathers, teaching young black fathers how to be fathers. And I once was a block brother. And I would do everything from education, violence intervention, working with the Boys and Girls Club. And I was with this organization called the Stop the Violence Coalition. And we all trying to help these people who are oppressed. And we never go to the source of oppression. We only dealing with symptoms. We only focus and acknowledge the symptoms. We never establish the source. And I say this one more time. When you're looking at a societal scale problem, when you're looking at a systemic scale problem, when you're looking at a problem that reoccurs or is persistent across generations, people without institutional power, systemic power, they don't have the capacity to create or sustain problems. Now, I can go out and rob somebody, break in somebody's house, snatch a purse, break in somebody's car. Now, that's a problem that I can cause as an individual. But a problem of multi-generational people incarcerated, multi-generationals with housing insecurity, multi-generational incarceration, multi-generational substandard or lack of education, functional illiteracy, those things can only be created through people who hold institutional power. And if you're trying to deal with these true problems, not the symptoms, but the core issues, you can only attack and transform institutions through securing large-scale mass organization, large-scale mass resistance, and large-scale overthrow or dismantling of oppressive institutions. That's it. But anyway, so I saw this thing, this quarter zip thing. And a quarter zip is casual wear. It's basically a sweater with a zipper that comes down 1/4 the length. I don't even have any, but I like I said, I have an aunt, an elderly aunt, for like the past 20 Christmases. She'll go to JCPenney's and buy me a quarter zip and put it in a gift box, wrap it up, and give it to me. Bless her heart. I appreciate it. And I don't celebrate Christmas. I don't buy gifts. And I tell people not to buy me gifts, but if people give me gifts for Christmas, I don't shun them. I understand that's their thing, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know they were this new symbol of I'm an appropriate Negro. So you had this thing where black people wearing these Nike tech suits, which is the uniform for, or the stereotypical uniform of a YN. They wear these Nike tech suits, Air Force Ones, and these shiesties. And then they'll show themselves looking menacing or even having a gun in their waistband. And then they'll put on a quarter zip with a polo shirt or a tie or a tie. And they'll be, and instead of having a gun, they'll have a briefcase and then these Negroes and saying, well, if you change your appearance, if you change how you dress and present yourself, then society will open up for you. Opportunities will open up for you. You won't be followed around places. Now, there was a time where khakis and a dress shirt was standard uniform. An adult man would not be seen in an overcoat. And we fell into slavery wearing the finest garments on the earth. I don't understand why we're still playing this game, but it's crazy to me that we're still playing this game. And here's the worst thing about that. Let's say this false stereotype was true, that if young black men begin to wear, and that's the thing, that's the whole thing about moving out of the ghetto. But let's pretend that, hey, if we dressed in a way that was more accommodating to the dominant society, then the dominant society would open up for us, right? And if we conducted ourselves in a more lawful manner, then the society would stop its crimes against us. Which isn't true, because we've seen that in fact, the more docile we are, the more aggressive the system is. And the higher potential for violent response to injustice, the more cunning, at least, the system has to be in imposing injustice. But even if it were true, this is the part that really bothered me. The YNs in the street and the affluent black people in corporate America are both sides of the same coin. It's the house slave versus field slave narrative. The appropriate Negro is no freer than the inappropriate nigger. Dr. Bobby E. Wright articulated that you are enslaved if all of the institutions and resources required for your survival, required to sustain you, are under the control of another people. You are enslaved by those people. And if that is the case, it doesn't matter whether you have a quarter zip or a shiesty. We're both enslaved. So we still have this dividing line where we pretty much assert, well, the black people who sag their pants or the black people who wear tech suits and shiesties are a different type of black than the black people who wear quarter zip suits and ties. Now, this is the debate that's been going on for over 100 years, where black people go back and forth like this. Whether it's a colored man in overalls versus a colored man in a tweed suit. Right? We've been having this debate. When the true dividing line between Africans to qualify a good African versus a bad African, an appropriate African versus an inappropriate black person, the true dividing line is not whether or not you look like a criminal, or you look like a thug, or you look like an academic or a student, or you look like you're lawful, whatever the fuck that looks like, because the biggest criminals wear suits and ties. The true qualifier for Africans is resistance or submission. Is this African conducting themselves in a way that is resistance to the systems and institutions of global white domination, or are they conducting themselves in a way where they submit or comply with the systems and institutions of white domination? That's the true dividing line. Not whether or not I wear a quarter zip or a shiesty, not whether or not I'm a thug or a student, not whether I'm unemployed and hustling, or whether I'm employed and paying my taxes, not whether I'm a too big criminal or I'm a lawful person. And the shiesty black gangsters, black criminals, black pimps and hustlers are not resisting the system. They are not considered a threat to the system, number one. They are also, from the earliest formations of the state, understood that the criminal element is a given. And there is whole industries built around the criminal element, to the extent that criminals are so intricate to and necessary to Western society and capitalism that if everyone stopped breaking laws tomorrow, the system would collapse, number one. Number two, they would simply rewrite the laws to turn us into criminals. They would rewrite enforcement policies, because this system thrives on and requires a certain segment of the population to be identified and treated as criminals. And if people stop doing the crimes that exist, they would invent new crimes, to the extent they will say, well, everybody's obeying the laws. Well, okay, we'll say not attending church is a crime. Okay, not attending church, everybody's going to church. Okay, getting to church late is a crime. Okay, people are showing up on time in church. Okay, being of the wrong denomination. All the Methodists and Episcopalians go to jail. You have to be a Southern Baptist. They would keep tightening the noose. They would keep stricter, because without criminals, if you simply go and look up all of the industries, all of the profits, all of the jobs, I would say upwards of a quarter or more of the people who have degrees are adjacent to. Most of the lawyers would be gone. Most of the counselors would be gone. Most of the faith-based initiatives and not-for-profits dealing with, recidivism and manufacturing, input and output, construction, infrastructure, security and technology and surveillance. So there's this mistake, because some of our leaders, some of y'all leaders, some of these cult leaders have lied and said that gangsters are revolutionary. Gangsters are our reserved fighting force. I'm not going to say who that cult leader is, but that was just so. And so we tend to think, that gangsters are somehow rebelling against the system. No, gangsters, thugs, criminals are as central and necessary in this system as teachers, plumbers, electricians, and engineers. So all I say is it still pains me that in 2025 we're still saying, well, there's good Negroes and bad Negroes. There's good blacks and bad blacks. There's the quarter zip blacks and the shiesty blacks. And we should start to encourage the YNs to become what they call, and this is not my term, this is what they say, become YKs. So they want to convert the YNs to be YKs. And YK stands for Young Kings. And I'm like, well, if you ever read history, show me a gangster that has done more damage to people than kings. Monarchs and kings are some of the worst people in history. Kings are dictators. Kings have absolute authority. I don't even know where we get this idea that a king is a noble person. The king is the worst fucking person in any society. So it just blows my mind. And the concept of like, oh, you're a young king. You want black people to conduct themselves as, and I mean, shit. In fact, criminals act like kings already, taking shit from people that don't belong to them, not doing their fair share to contribute to society, extracting more than they give, trying to dominate and rule. Like, it was the craziest shit. And so I'm just following. I didn't engage. I figured I'd come on here and talk about it. That we want, that there's a movement. Well, it's not even a movement. There's a trend. We got to stop calling shit movements that ain't. There's a trend where they want our black youth to go from YNs to YKs. Because we entertaining in YR, Young Revolutionary, that's not even an option. And I would argue that for an individual who conducts themselves like a nigga to begin to conduct themselves like a king is a regression. And what it really bothers me is, and the whole purpose that I started this channel was ideology. Because we see black youth going astray, and the best thing we can say is, hey, go corporate. Become a capitalist. Begin to embrace and become an integrationist. We don't call it integration anymore, but that's all it is. Look at white folks and do as they do. Look at what they deem to be appropriate, what they deem, how they define success, how they define progress, what they define as their priority. Look at white folks and do as they do. We can't beat them, let's join them. So you go from being a petty thug to being a YK. Yeah, it's a meme, but it's getting around, and the debate blows my mind. And there's a debate about respectability, but all this debate does is say the only options left to us. The only options left to us. Rebellion is not because gangs and people in the streets, they're not against the system. They have no ideological or political opposition to the system. Their opposition to the system is not based on morality, not based on principles. It's not even based on culture. The average street criminal's problem with the system is their exclusion. They're excluded from what they deem to be the spoils of empire. But that's most of us, even we who are lawful. The average black American and the average white American, the average voter in the United States would say, hey, if there could be a president who got the gas prices down, who could bring rent down. They say it all the time. Oh, I care about gas. The gas is too high. Rent is too high. If there's a president who says, okay, listen, average American citizen, we bring in a lot of resources, revenues, and have a lot of power based on imperialism and genocide. And instead of allowing all that wealth that the U.S. illegally accumulates across the world and the exploitation of people across the world, instead of hoarding it in a few billionaires, we're going to better disseminate and better distribute the resources to the citizens and bring more benefits to the citizens. Most people would not give a shit. They wouldn't care about Haiti. They wouldn't care about Palestine. They wouldn't care about Sudan. That's the average citizen. Congo. But then that same person that says, well, my comfort, my luxury, my opportunity is a byproduct of living in the seat of the empire, living in the United States, which holds the baton of Western imperialism. I'm happy. I'm content. I'm well fed. Get yours. Anyway, so it's just my main problem, as I said, the only divider, just to sum up, the only thing that determines whether you are good or bad is whether you are in resistance or submission. And if you are in submission to white hegemony and capitalism, it doesn't matter whether you're doing it in a quarter zip or a shiesty. A slave is a slave, whether you're a field slave or a house slave. The only dignified and appropriate and position that any African on the planet, I don't care what your talent are or what you bring in or what you put out, the only thing we can celebrate and the only thing we should be debating is the quality of resistance. And we value you according to your quality of resistance that you are able to pose to the systems and institutions of global white domination. That's it. There's nothing else. Oh, well, and if you are going to be out here trying to convert YNs, you should be converting YNs and YKs to Black revolutionary, Pan-African revolutionaries. Because right now, these YKs that y'all talk about, take off the shiesty and put on a quarter zip and go to school and learn, and then do what? Go work for Tesla? Go work for the NSA, FBI, CIA, ATF, DEA? Go become a UN diplomat and negotiate on behalf and protect Israel from being sanctioned by the UN Security Council? What are these high achieving Negroes up to? We've been spitting out high achieving Negroes since Reconstruction. And every hero, every person we've got to put up on our wall doesn't tend to be one of these high achievers by their standards. And even when a Negro goes off and becomes a Dr. Martin Luther King, as soon as they step up and be like, yo, I'm going to work with the working class people, poor people's march, they don't get invited on the red carpet no more. So anyway, I'm ready to open up for questions, comments, criticisms. I shared the link. Thank you, Wilsonian Garveyite. I'd like some clarity on what will. Oh, Amos Wilson. See, I'm indoctrinated. My conditioning, because when I hear Wilsonian, I think about Woodrow Wilson. My goodness, he's like a Wilsonian, but thank you for that contribution. When you said Wilsonian, I'm thinking Woodrow Wilson. Well, he was the first academic scholarly president, but he was racist. How do you tie Wilson and? But anyway, I'm assuming you mean Amos Wilson. But anyway. Do we have any questions, comments, or criticisms? You can type it in. I think I shared the link a couple of times where you can come on live. If not, we'll be wrapping up super early. No? How do I pin? I don't know if I can pin something. I don't think it allows me. Where's James? I got to call James. Okay. First questions. What are some steps to cultivate urban agriculture? To be honest, you have to, first of all, change a lot of zoning laws. Because a lot of rules, a lot of city layout, city planning and stuff they do not allow for really urban agriculture. You can do urban gardening, but farming is a whole different animal. And I know because I had a urban garden and we used to call it a farm, but that's just for branding purposes. And we had, I think a good quarter acre, and we're putting out hundreds of pounds of organic fruits and vegetables. We had like a dozen fruit trees, peach tree, pear tree, apple trees. But one of our biggest, but what we did was we went to the school board, because your local school, you have to find, there's 3 institutions that have a lot of fucking land that you'd be very surprised. Universities, if you have a university in there, they have a lot of idle land. Churches, the churches have a lot of empty, unused land. The ministers and the pastors and the schools, they own a lot of land. The land, it's not, they don't own it now, it's transferred. But when we were farming on this large plot of empty land, it was controlled by the Jesuits, the Catholic Jesuit order or something. And you approach them, and most people that have land, they just pay to have it clear cut or pay to have like rubbish removal and idle land. So what you do is you find some idle land, you find out whether it's owned by the city, whether it's privately or publicly owned. And most people, that if they've got some empty land, and you can say, well, we can beautify it. That's another thing about urban agriculture. It has to be able to mesh with the aesthetic of the city. So I don't know if you've ever been like driven through Southern Illinois or driven through the Midwest farms. Some people might say, oh, look at that majestic farms, but it's not like a city park. It's not something that's really made for human engagement or human scale. They're really large in seas of grain and all that stuff. But if you're doing urban agriculture, you don't want to do monoculture. And that's why it's hard to generate profits. But you can't do monoculture. You want to have a wide range of offerings. And just this small plot of land, we grew squash. We grew, what was that shit? Dita was growing. He was growing like loofahs. He was growing those things that they weren't for food. We were growing loofahs. We had a bee colony, tomatoes, all sorts of tomatoes, onions, carrots, potatoes, what they call that shit, asparagus. But we laid it out in such a way that it looked decorative. It looked like a garden. So the steps towards is securing land, securing partnerships, making sure any type of local laws or ordinances or policies that would limit or restrict you being able to do, which a lot of cities have opened up about it. And then put your team together, make it happen. But it varies from place to place. When I was in Missouri, it was actually harder to get a community garden going than it was here in Chicago. And I think Missouri is like, man, you go like 2 miles out of the city and you got farmland. Why you got to bring that shit in here? But that's changed. Shout out to Saste and his crew. Shout out to Saste and his crew in Kansas City doing urban agriculture. I hope that helps. But you definitely need to partner with these institutions and find the people that got land. There was a time where I was working with some people that went and bought, everybody that went out and bought land. It's like, hey, we're going to buy this plot in the city and just grow our own. It always collapses. There's too much idle land that you can get for free. And that way you won't be under the pressures of the market. Where did I get my fashion sis from? I hate to admit this. But when I was a kid, I always loved Benetton. But I couldn't afford it. So my aesthetic is 90s b-boy. If you go back and look at the old Tribe Called Quest or the old Poor Righteous Teacher videos from the 90s, UMCs, that was kind of my aesthetic was basically an aged version of 90s b-boy. So that's what. But I used to like Benetton, and I couldn't afford Benetton. But then by the time I got older and had a little money, and I saw how much Benetton cost, I'm like, I ain't paying for this shit. So it's like inner city, hip hop, urban, preppy. So I've been dressing the same old way. I guess I'm stuck in a time warp. But I would say that's kind of what it is. And then whatever, if my wife sees something she think would look nice on me, and if she buys me something, she makes an effort to show she cares and buys me something, I got to make sure whatever she buys me make an appearance a couple of times a month. Because by the time she asks me about it, that sweater I bought you, I know I'm in trouble. So I try to wear things that she gets me often enough that she doesn't have to ask me about it. And that's that. And then, it's kind of funny because now my sons we're all pretty much the same size. So we kind of have like, he'll give me a denim jacket, I'll give him a cardigan, and we exchange shit. But then it's bad. My sons don't like accepting shit from me because I'll give him something and then he'll be gone a few days, and then he'll come back by the house to see his mother, not me, and then I'll be like, is that my belt? I just did that today. I was like, did you got my belt? He's like, Dad, yeah, this is your belt, but you gave it to me. So it's kind of dangerous for them to be taking my shit, but because I forget and then accuse them of stealing. But that's it. I say 90s alternative hip hop. That's my fashion sense, and I just haven't changed it. And I had a homeboy. I had two homeboys that were really fashion dudes, and I hope they never see this. And if they see it, and then it's AI. But I had a homeboy. He was a fashion designer. He was a Rastafarian fashion designer named Be Free. We called him Garfield, Soft Lines, Brooklyn. And then I had another homeboy named Rich. And those were two of like the most stylish dudes that I knew. And so even though I didn't completely bite their style, sucker MC them, they were kind of like role models for me. Like I should put more care into how I dress. I should put more care into how I coordinate an outfit, because I could buy a shirt. Like, I like this shirt, and just throw it on because I like the shirt, but don't plan the accessories and the shoes and shit. So that's it. So for them two cats, Rich, shout out to Rich. I used to call him Rich Man. Shout out to Rich. Shout out to G, Garfield. I haven't seen Garfield in a long time, but I saw Rich not too long ago. But that's that. I guess that's a bit of a long. Can you talk about the Nicki Minaj situation and how blackness is not enough? Oh, yeah, Nicki Minaj. Listen, I don't blame Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj has a fetish for sex offenders. Her brother's a sex offender, and she paid for his legal fees, and she was even involved in, some people say that she was involved with intimidating the witnesses. His brother was abusing his stepdaughter, and she covered his legal fees, paid his bail, and tried to aid him in every way she can, up to and including some say intimidating. So, and then she went and married a sex offender, an unapologetic sex offender, and then was caught attacking his victim and coercing his victim to recant her statement. So, by the time you have a pedophile and adjudicated sex pest for president, how could she has a fetish. Like Michelle Obama, she loves war criminals. She loves George W. Bush and his war criminal daddy. And I mean, people, don't kink shame her. Don't kink shame. She has a fetish. She loves sex offenders. So, how could she not go MAGA and support Trump? Since her beloved brother and her baby daddy husband are all sex offenders. So I think that's her motivation. But she is a pawn. She is a tool. And we see that most of these MAGA Negroes get used, tokens get spent. So I assume that once MAGA no longer needs her, she will be, called the harlot and the unclean demonic witch and all this other shit. So she's going to get played. But they did lose Candace Owens. Candace Owens has gone off the MAGA plantation. So I think if I had to trade and pick between Candace and Nikki, I'd probably choose Nikki too. But she don't know what the blood clot she's talking about. She don't know nothing about the persecution of Christians. She don't care nothing about Trump is summarily executing citizens of Trinidad, murdering them. So shame on her. And all the Barbs are coons now. They're no longer Barbie dolls. They're coon dolls. I think that's the most academic answer. Franklin.
What's going on, Uncle
So
Diallo?
you got a question, comment, criticism?
I actually had a comment. So I'm a substitute teacher down here in Georgia, an
Mm,
organizer,
mm,
and a teacher. Um, and what I've noticed with these youth, I'm in a middle school,
mm,
is that they thirst for answers. They thirst for knowledge. They thirst for it. When I get the opportunities to actually pull some of these young men and women away where I can actually educate them on dialectics, teaching them just the basics of dialectics, teaching them the basics of intersectionality, actually giving them history that is usable.
right.
They thirst for it. They ask for more. Um, and so what I've been noticing is with this institutionalization of these schools, because right now where I'm at, they just spent $20 million to install um, metal detectors in the school. Like they're paying for a security guard now who gets paid more than the substitute teachers that they hire on full time, right? So is priorities there, and I'm noticing that the teachers are so disorganized because of, again, the lack of ideology, the lack of politics, that they just find ways to prepare the students to be safe from the oppression, and that's what they spend all their efforts organizing around. So okay, let's put all of these metal detectors in this school, and never mind the fact that we're criminalizing every student that walks through these doors now by implementing this into this already very stringent institution where we got like 30, 20, anywhere between 28 to 34 kids in a classroom, one teacher, you know what I'm saying? So they're already packed in, they're already not allowed to speak. I'm already seeing the institutionalization within this system and the ways in which the even the teachers in there just find ways to organize and navigate around these kids being able to be safe from the system itself. And they do that by implementing in these very counter-revolutionary ideologies, right? Middle school now has uh, basically a JROTC in it, right? So sixth, seventh, and eighth graders are now being indoctrinated into military mannerism and military mindset, and we also have entrepreneurship and financial literacy being taught in the middle school, but their chief complaint is about the kids' lack of focus and the lack of ability to read when they got a. So it's like we're seeing all of this stuff play out in real time,
Mm.
and as an organizer, what I'm saying, having to watch this and trying to get these teachers to like start leaning more one way. Like I had a parent come in who complained about the metal detectors, and I said, "Well, why don't you say something at the next PTA to the other PTA teachers?" He's like, "You could do that." I was like, "Yes, you could talk with the other parents and say that you don't like. Y'all can actually start to talk about the things you don't like." I didn't know I could do that. Like, we're that far gone.
Yeah.
We're that far gone
Yeah.
where even the adults don't know they can organize.
I have two sons that went to public school, and one that's a senior in public school now. So, yeah, I've seen that throughout. Yeah, it is very aggressive, and that's why it's not enough to simply teach youth. You have to engage in the tactics of counter indoctrination.
Hmm.
But the problem is a lot of what's happening in school, because if they were just getting lies in school, the schools would lose legitimacy and collapse. But the problem is that the lies they're told in school are reinforced at home,
At
reinforced
home.
at the barbershop, reinforced at the church, reinforced by the rappers and the TikTokers. It's a multifaceted, multilateral attack. So it's like when black youth listen to drill music and go out and what do you call mimic or replicate what they hear in the music. But the primary consumers, going all the way back from the birth of gangster rap, NWA, Bust Down, Ghetto Boys, white youth have been the primary consumers of gangster rap.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't, by and large, adopt the persona. It is a disposable product to them. White people have always been entertained by their victims degrading themselves. You know, you go back and look at white media, and you ever see Breakfast at Tiffany's? They love seeing their victims of their oppression and colonization portrayed in degrading ways or acting in degrading ways. That's something they've done since the Roman conquest.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why masses of white youth can listen to this music and not adopt it, suburban, affluent Bill Gates children listen to this drill shit, but they're not spinning the block, is because the music is not reinforced in all other aspects of their life. Whereas for a young man or woman, black man or woman on the south side of Chicago listening to drill, but their environment is dehumanizing. Their home, they're hearing dehumanizing, anti-black, hot, and belligerent antisocial behaviors. The school is already treating them like a criminal. All other institutions. And, you know, I grew up there's a lot of work to being poor. I remember being, you know, down at the welfare office and the Medicaid office and going to the Medicaid dentist. You know, if you have a social worker or your mama has a family services case, you're always in these different places where people are treating you like the problem. So you treat me like a problem. So all I have to say is, in order to counter, because you're doing good work, you know, my wife is an educator. My son is being trained to get his teacher's license in school. And, you know, the work you do, the seeds you planted, they are not irrelevant. They do, you know, sometimes germinate. But for us to really upend this shit is that we have to attack it at all levels. Mm-hmm. If children are getting a radical affirmation at home, radical affirmation in church, to the extent that's possible, radical affirmation in the culture in the community. If you're not getting radical affirmation at the cookout, family gatherings, every time you come to your family, you saying grace over the table, eating denurtured food and praising white Jesus or celebrating some Western holiday, and they never see you functioning as an African. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. But yeah, it's going to continue in this way until we really get serious about being liberated as opposed to integrated.
Right. No, and that's exactly it.
Bobby E. Wright said in relationship that you get training from schools and education from your community. So when you go to school, you can develop skills, critical thinking skills, analytical skills, trades, technical skills. You can get training for skills from school, but your education, your philosophy about the world, your place in the world, how to engage the world, the goals and ambitions of your people and community, that has to come from your community. So a lot of Black people, we are only trained. We're not truly educated with PhDs, you know, master's degrees, technical degrees and certifications. We're only trained because the education we get is just a bastardized version. Most of us are indoctrinating Black children in a watered down version of being white.
Right.
Made white, like Yvette Carnell says.
Right. No, and that's exactly what it is. And it's disgusting, man. It really is disgusting to watch the process happen.
The process. And in middle school you ever read Kwanzaa Kunjufu?
Oh God, no, I haven't.
Countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys. He talks about, you know, he basically breaks down the evolution of formal education, where a child enters schools curious and enthusiastic, and by 5th grade he had this thing he identified as the 5th grade failure syndrome, which I went through. Just like reading a biography, somebody that wrote. When I read that book, I had an opportunity to meet him before he passed. But yeah, and it is deliberate. Like I said, they need a certain portion of us to be field slaves, and they take a smaller portion of us to be field house slaves, and the rest of us are. They don't want none of us to be liberated Africans. That does not fit into the culture or the economy of the U.S.
No, that's facts. That's facts. And like for real, I appreciate everything that you do on. Like it's a pleasure anytime I'm able to catch the live, man, and get some of the sage wisdom so that I can
I
do
appreciate
the
it.
work. You know what I'm saying? So I
Yep.
appreciate you.
All right, man. Thanks for reaching out. I hope you reach out
All right,
again.
now, peace.
All right, peace. Okay, I'm gonna go to a question and then I'll go to my next caller. Uh, okay, this is a really good question. How many people are necessary for a revolution, and what is your opinion on accelerationism or acceleration theory? Number one, I'd say a number of people for revolution is a dozen. You need 1 dozen revolutionaries can transform a society. And how do I know? That are properly committed and properly organized. 12 people are more than enough to spark a revolution. To spark a revolution. As far as I would say 12. So the next question, I think accelerationism is never been demonstrated or proven. Accelerationism meaning that the faster the system collapses, the sooner we'll get free, or the sooner that we'll have more positive outcome. Or when this society collapses, the quicker it collapses, the sooner we'll have an opportunity to rebuild a better society from the rubble of this one. This society is unredeemable, so we should just allow it. It just doesn't work for a myriad of reasons. So it's really a surrenderism. Hey, because you'll notice a lot of these people who claim to be accelerationists, they're not out there actually accelerating shit. They're just watching the people who are destroying the world for profit do what they do. And they say, hey, I'll step back and let them go. The reality is that the current manifestation of capitalism and white hegemony is destroying the life sustaining capacity of the earth. The rainforest, once cut down, the earth does not have the capacity to regrow the rainforest. Ocean acidification, the glaciers are melting. The phytoplankton is being reduced. Hell, the whales of the ocean, the biggest creatures ever to exist in the history of life on earth, the whales have stopped singing, and nobody knows why. So the reality is, if we allow this system to play out and to go through its natural progression or unnatural progression, there won't be anything left to rebuild. So I think accelerationists are truly extinctionists. And if they're content with going extinct, then why organize around it? Just go the fuck away. Don't speak, don't engage. It's kind of like the divestors. I know there was a time where women were like, we should divest from men. And then they would show up in spaces that allowed for men or welcomed men or cultivated by men and tell them about how I'm divested. Now, I don't think that's how divestment works. So I think that whenever someone says I'm an accelerationist, I think you need to say, no, you're an extinctionist. And I'm not or a surrenderist. And I'm not ready to surrender, and I'm not going to accept and lay down and accept extinction. So take your shitty ideals and your shitty ideology and your invalid theories and get the fuck out of my face. That's what I would say to accelerationists. Okay. Izzy,
It's good to see you again.
Hey. Well, it would be good to see you, but it's good to hear you, bro.
Yeah, it's good to hear you, Diallo.
I appreciate it.
I had a question in good faith. You know, I'm a big fan of the show. You know, I try to catch every show, but I hear on the shows that when you talk about anarchism, you say the issue is that like they intend to move on without any layering beforehand, any foundation,
Mhm.
right? But like in my readings, I come to understand that, regardless of the type of anarchist, because like you know how the left is, it's all split into sectors. Everybody's got their own ideas, but they all have an element of creating that foundation, regardless. Like prefigurative politics or the anarcho-syndicalists, utilizing the unions to, develop the consciousness in order to change, how people relate to the system. So like, do you really consider that valid, or do you think that like you gotta have that rigid stages?
I think that anarchism is valid. I think it is a noble goal, but the problem with anarchism is that the practical implication, the process to, and because whenever someone says, well, this is the place we want to be, this beautiful place is where we want to be, but you need a roadmap to get there. And I've yet to see an anarchist articulate an achievable or practical roadmap between the state of the earth now and anarchy. So anarchy is a desirable outcome to which they have no real path to achieving, because I don't know in history of a truly anarcho society. Now, I can give you examples of socialist or capitalist, but hierarchies are kind of hardwired. Now, I have no issues with hierarchies. That's why I say we have to destroy unjust hierarchies, because there are some quote unquote just hierarchies, such as a parent having a certain level of authority over a child, and the older and more capable the child comes, the less and less the parental authority should be. But and expertise gives someone a level of authority. So if I'm working with someone who has much more experience and expertise than I do, then of course they're going to be higher. Their decision is going to outweigh, or their input is going to outweigh mine until I can reach that level. But the anarchist says, well, all relationships need to be cooperative and non-coerced. Now that if you have a non-coerced and cooperative, it's still going to have hierarchy. So there's certain elements to anarchy. To me, I'm ultimately an anarchist, but I don't identify myself as an anarchist because the reality of creating an anarcho society is so distant because of the level of oppression, exploitation, and dysfunction that humans are been under for since the foundings of civilization almost, does not lend itself to an easy, simple, or short-term transition to anarchy. I hope I'm being clear.
I do get it. Can I ask a follow-up question? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
So like, I was like reading all these like things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was talking about, methods of anarchism and
Mm-hmm.
the broadly connecting the broadly connecting thing between all these different, conceptions of anarchy is developing the material and ideological frameworks under capitalism, and either through municipalism or through violent revolution, deconstructing the structures which already exist. So like you have that sort of building, but instead of having a stage in between capitalism and the ideal, whatever, communism, whatever you want to refer it to as, instead of having that stage to develop that breaking down of structures, it happens beforehand as a precursor. I hope I'm making that clear. So I don't know if you think that's like realistic, if that's something we can develop or not.
Yes, I think it's something we can develop. I absolutely think we can develop. I've worked with anarchists throughout my years of being active. And there's a big difference because ultimately, Marx's theory, if you read Marx, communism, the ultimate outcome of communism is an anarcho society. But he said that but he also said that capitalism was necessary. So he didn't see capitalism as something that was just alien to humans. He saw it as something that was necessary to build up the material industrial infrastructure that will allow for the leisure and the non-coerced relationships, and the mass production and mass industrial production will provide for the needs of the humanity. But that infrastructure, from his philosophy, couldn't have been established without capitalism. So communism, socialism is able to take the infrastructure and the system, the means of production, the systems and techniques for mass production and distribution created by the capitalist to bring about anarchism. Now, he was wrong. I disagree with him on that. But ultimately, yes, it can be worked towards. And if anarchists, because you notice early anarchists were out here, they did a lot of good things. The anarcho-syndicalists have really been banging and did put in a lot of good work. But it's not really well sustained because they tend to break down because they pushing for anarchy in society, but their organizations need a certain level of structure and hierarchy that they also are against. But as Del Jones said, to defeat a system, you need a system to defeat a system. So if you have an anarchist organizations and all the relationships within the anarchist organizations are anarcho, how do you sustain and fight? Because you look at guerrilla warfares and guerrilla formations. You read Che Guevara. They have a command structure, right?
Right.
So even though they're working to bring about socialism, and socialism, the ultimate outcome of socialism is anarchism. But it's going to be the structuralist, the hierarchs who bring about socialism.
I guess I kind of see that in some of the organizations I joined. I got kicked out though, but you know, the methods by which they, organized and conversed, they weren't really. To be honest, I'm not even sure they understood, the works their books were from. But that's because a lot of them were like, they were Sternerites, very very individualist people and stuff. So they broadly had like a very broad understanding of reaching things through consensus, but it was a very
but that gets tedious, right?
it actually gets real annoying, but also like
Right.
coercive because nobody can move on until everybody. So it
Right.
turns
So the reality of the revolution is, the reality is in guerrilla warfare is adaptability. So there are things like in my wife and I's relationship, it's anarchical. My wife and I do not have a hierarchy. I don't conduct myself, I'm the man, I'm the head of the household. Right? So you can have an anarcho, non-hierarchical relationships, but if we woke up, if there was a bang or a break and somebody was breaking into our house, I have to assert a certain level of authority. Like, hey, yo, get the kids, you do this, boom, I'm gonna do that. And she was like, wait, there's time. If you wake up and you smell smoke, your house is on fire, you can't have a consensus about that. Somebody has to take, assert, hey, this is the plan, let's execute, here's your role. So, but I don't want to disparage anarchy. It can work, but anarchy is not, it has been warped. Anarchy does not mean that someone cannot take leadership, that someone cannot assume a role. But the problem is anarchy. You'll notice that anarchists work best when they're united with, because somebody had asked a question about the Spanish Civil War, which is a very interesting time in history. Oh, I didn't see it. What did happen to it? Somebody had asked a question about the anarchists in the Spanish Civil War, but it came in. I saw it just in the comments. But I can't believe I missed it. I should have. But anyway, they worked with the communists. You know, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. So anarchists are always most effective when they form alliances with more hierarchical organizations. And many of the most well-known and successful anarchists are those who worked alone. You know, so anarchy does not really lend itself to sustained wide-scale organization. And sustained wide-scale mass organization is what we need in order to challenge white hegemony and capitalism.
Yeah, like I've read in a lot of these books on anarchism the concept of delegation. Like this is why I feel like a lot of people don't really care about it. They call themselves anarchists. Like
yeah, but I think most true revolutionaries are anarchists at heart, meaning we want to destroy hierarchy. We want to destroy masters, gods, and rulers. We want liberation for everyone. But like I said, we got to walk that path. We have to get there. We're not there. And simply tearing down capitalism or even bringing down the empire is not going to lead to anarchism. Most times when empires fall, another empire rises in its place. So anarchism needs to do a lot more work. You know, and we live in very complex social structures across vast spaces with a lot of intricate and complex technology. And when anarchy was founded, life was much simple, and it's a very beautiful idea. But how can you have anarchy at the scale sustained across large populations over wide territory over a long period of time, and when there's organized hierarchical subversion and resistance to your anarchical system in society? Anarchy works great on a communal farm, a cooperative co-op. We had a little vegan cafe, and it was very anarchical. You know, I'm the owner, I'm the boss, you're the waiter. Everybody had input, and we sat together, and it was a beautiful space. You know, and we were getting really delicious. So anarchy works at a certain scale and within certain circles. But when you start to expand it, or when you structure it and aim it at an oppressor, it tends to break down. But anyway, I hope that, but I don't abandon anarchism. I think it needs to be refined and modernized.
I hate to take more time, but can I just make one
more
request
second.
for an episode?
Yeah, I got a few questions to get to. So yeah, one short.
It's just a request for an episode. I see in a lot of, you know, people I call friends and family. I see the same talking points from directly from like books from like liberals like Locke and like Berkeley and so on. The same talking points in defense of the current system, and they never read the books. It's almost word for word, and they never heard of these people. And I just find that interesting. And like, I wish you could do an episode on like liberal or enlightenment conditioning. You know?
Oh yeah. I mean, you don't have. I mean, the ideas of Locke and what's that guy's name that wrote Leviathan? What's his name? What's the guy that wrote Leviathan?
Oh, Hobbes.
Hobbes. A lot of people are Hobbesian. A lot of people are Calvinist. And they never read Calvin. They don't know who Calvin is. They don't know who Hobbes is. You know, but they articulate their philosophies too. Yes, that is very true. Thomas Hobbes, thank you. Thank you for everybody that told me. But yes, you'll meet a lot of people that, and I say all the time when I'm out organizing and working with oppressed people, They are acting out a script they never read. And that's why there's a Beyond Freedom and Dignity. There was a time where the rulers of the world saying, listen, we can't just send out roguish knights. We can't just commit mass slaughter and maintain our control over the masses. The way that technology, access to weapons and access to destructive technologies is becoming so powerful that the tyrants, the warlords, the kings and monarchs, the capitalists, the barons couldn't just, there was a time that if you had a coal miner striking, you just send in the Pinkerton guys with a Gatling gun and shoot down all the coal miners, right? Even in Israel now, Israel is experiencing high rates of depression, high rates of in the IDF, high rates of depression, suicide, and people are abandoning the forces. The psychological toll is being leveled against Israel with all its weapons, fighting against an enemy that doesn't have a capacity to resist. Just the wholesale slaughter that they're engaged in is still harming their citizens and their fighters, right? And so they were like, well, this is the most inefficient way to dominate masses of people. So they came up with this thing they call the technology of control. And they set up a way to say, hey, we can't just tell people. And let me see. This book probably breaks it down the best, the modern version. And this is Beyond Freedom and Dignity by B.F. Skinner. And I have a copy of this book. And he talks about, well, can you have somebody, how can you indoctrinate somebody into capitalism, white hegemony, authoritarian submission, Judeo-Christian vow? How can we get 1 billion people to fall into this trap without having to whip them and make them think it's their own thing? He said, how do you give people freedom and dignity and still control them? How do you give somebody freedom and dignity and still enslave them? The best way to enslave and sustain someone in slavery is to give them the illusion of freedom. So he's like, okay, everybody, you have black people right now. America's not racist, or I've never experienced racism. White people have treated me better than my own people. Nicki Minaj, looking at Trump on TV, bomb her own Trinidadian people and going out here praising. So that is the technology of control. So when you hear somebody like, goddamn, you sound like Adam Smith when they out here defending capitalism and market principles, the free market. And they never read, The Wealth of Nations. They don't know who Adam Smith is. That's how. Through mass indoctrination, through every area of human relation, people get these ideas. I just rewatched Ghostbusters with my sons early this year, and I hadn't seen Ghostbusters since I was a kid, the original Ghostbusters. And that is capitalist propaganda. Go back and watch Ghostbusters. That is free market anarcho-capitalist propaganda. And I didn't know it when I was watching it. So anyway, that's how.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
You have a good evening. Thanks for reaching out. Okay, I got a few more things on the thing, and then I'm out of here. Professor James Smalls finally turning on Tariq Nasheed and labeling him. See, really, I think that's a good thing. Let me tell you, nothing but love and respect for Professor James Smalls, but I thought he was on some bullshit. And I had called him out once, and he called me. This is years ago when he first showed up on a panel. He showed up on some panel. This is before the break between FBA and ADOS. This is before they split. And he called in and explained to me, listen, brother, I'm not there. Whatever they're talking about, I'm coming there because these people have a platform to reach the people, and I'm just here to reach the people. So he always knew they were on some bullshit. He just thought, like a lot of people were saying, oh, we're going to get these gangs and we're going to radicalize these gangs. Remember when Dead Prez came out with that revolutionary but gangster, and they came out with that red, black, and green bandana instead of the red or blue bandana, and they took off the bohemian tribal clothes and started wearing dickies and khakis. And they were saying, hey, we're going to trick these gangsters into being revolution. And we're going to take up arms. Or even when speech from Arrested Development, brothers with the AKs and the 9Ms need to learn how to correctly shoot them, save those rounds for the revolution. And so that illusion that you can turn gangsters into revolutionaries, or you can use the platform of FBA and ADOS to bring a message of Pan-African solidarity or Black liberation. So he used the old tire tactic, but I'm glad he's finally calling them scumbags out. He needs to call out ADOS. And as long as he's acknowledging the role, because me seeing Tariq Nasheed on a flyer, on a promotion next to James Smalls is diminishing James Smalls and giving legitimacy to that two-bit pimp hustler, Tariq Nasheed. You know, and I had a discussion with him and he explained himself to me, and I didn't want to, you know, go back and forth with the elder scholar. I said, okay, I accept that. I don't think it's going to work, but at least I know. So he knew from day one. That's all I'm saying. He knew for day one, Tariq wasn't shit. Not shit. And he knew from day one. He didn't, so he's calling it out, but he knew years ago when he first started, you know, engaging with them scumbags. Okay. Diallo, are you familiar with Dr. Butchware's scholarly writings on Islam as a radical religion, pre-colonial African society, Islamicized? Is misconception or your assessment? I don't get, he's a Muslim, so take anything a Muslim says about Islam with a grain of salt. There's a certain level of bias and there's a certain blind spot there. But nobody can deny the contributions that Islam has given to, you know, from math and science to architecture. But the thing is, that's the same hustle that Christians use. We bring civilization, therefore you can excuse the genocide, the rape, the colonization, the ongoing oppression. Because look at the good things we brought. You know, the proliferation of literacy, the mass literacy coming out of the Catholic Church and its technology and the printing press and so many those monasteries, everything from even espresso. I love my lattes, and that came from Gregorian monks or some monastic order invented espresso. So yes, I can sit here and articulate the positive contributions coming out of Arabic culture or Arabic society or Islamic culture or whatever you want to call it, the Persians before and after they were colonized and indoctrinated into Islam. Same thing out of Southeast Asia, India. Yeah, every population of people has made some contribution to the collective knowledge or the collective development of human civilization. But I don't understand why the fuck we saying that when they wholesaling, committing genocide in Sudan, where they got African people in chattel slavery in Libya, in Mauritania, where they're conducting massacres in Burkina Faso, where they're literally lynching African women in the streets for blasphemy against the prophet. So yeah, we can talk about the contributions, but to what end? I did promise to do a show on communism versus socialism and all those things. I might bring my wife on to do a discussion on the pedagogy of the oppressed. She teaches that in her, she uses that book in many of her classes. So yes, I'm going to make a note, and I might even do a book review on pedagogy of the oppressed. I did promise that, and you know, the promise shall be kept. Diallo no, I am not a Marxist Leninist. You know, I am a rightist. It's kind of like I did not learn. Like, it's kind of weird because somebody, if you read and quote Marx, you're a Marxist. which is weird to me. But if I read and reference Kwanzaa Kunjufu in a discussion about education, I'm not a Kunjufuist. So no, I'm a Toureist. I'm an Nkrumahist. I'm a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. I'm very clear on my ideology, but I appreciate and recognize the value of Lenin and Marx in their analysis, dialectical and historical materialism, and the strategies and tactics employed by the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks, and appreciate, the historical reality of the communist revolution to bring down the czars. So, but I'm not. No, I don't. People call me a Marxist or a Leninist and a Marxist, but I don't resent the title. It's just not an accurate title. And I have nothing. I consider Marxists to be allies in the struggle. So no anarchism, no acceleration, just more liberalism. If that's what you got, is that what you heard? Go for it. Yeah. See, people gonna hear what they want to hear, irregardless of what you say. Thank you, ZZ Lion Dad 8856. Much appreciated and very needed. Okay, I guess that's it. We made it. I'm sorry I was a little late. I appreciate y'all. Right, Dr. Mukmanis. I sit here and quote Bobby E. Wright, Amos Wilson, even James Smalls. I reference him more than I do Marx. But I say Marx, people, oh, you're a Marxist. But I can sit here every show. I quote Dale Jones. Nobody calls me a Joneses. I work hard to keep his legacy and his teachings relevant and alive. And nobody ever calls me a Joneses. The moment you say, "Oh, you're a Marxist," that's that white that white. And hell, I probably quote, if we're gonna be white, I quote and reference Michael Parenti more than Marx. Nobody calls me a Parentist. Anyway, Northern Nigeria too. Yes, in Northern Nigeria too. They bringing hell on us. The Christians in the South and the Muslims from the North and Africans sandwiched in between, as Del Jones said, hacking each other to death over foreign ideologies. Yes, that's Amos Wilson. Yeah, you can tell a lot. But anyway, I appreciate y'all. We're going to end with CD. Appreciate the contributors. If you want to make a contribution to the BroDiallo broadcast, you can just look at the various ways to contribute down below. Especially this time of year, I know support really dries up. Everybody's hurting. Everybody's struggling. So if you do have the capacity to contribute, please do. If not, I understand. And if you don't even have the means to materially contribute, you can help me in the algorithm. Like, share, subscribe, share the show with your friends, lovers, allies, enemies, haters, and innovators. Share the show far and wide and help to get the word out. Revolutionary Pan-Africanist. I appreciate this. I'm very happy. I'm just gonna, when I want to do Q&As, I'm not going to try to squeeze them in anymore. I'm just going to do the Q&A out the gate instead of trying to squeeze it in, because I love engaging with the community directly and hearing y'all. And Prester always hating in the comments, and but he don't never want to know real smoke. Anyway, I'll leave with this. Here's the thing about the Epstein files. What's his name? What's that comedian's name that's on Chris Tucker? I ain't even gonna give y'all a chance to tell me. Chris Tucker was on Epstein's plane. Here's the thing about billionaires and powerful people. They have their tentacles in everything. Billionaires and wealthy people have their tentacles in everything. And Epstein, being an agent of Mossad and an influential billionaire, has many interactions. If I woke up tomorrow and I had $1 billion in my bank account, I'd have a whole lot more friends than I have now. So I will say that everyone that has some type of connection or engagement with Epstein is not necessarily a predator. And that's just a fact. In one story I heard about, Chris Rock was doing some charity work, and he was on a plane with Epstein. and Epstein and some other people that were engaged in this outreach and flew to the Middle East or Africa somewhere a few years ago. And one of the victims of Epstein says that, yes, she recalls Chris Rock being there on the plane and being at some of the fundraiser events, but they said they never saw him engage in any lewd or criminal activities. So the reality is, like, I know a guy, not that this billionaire has been accused of anything, but I know some people that just got grants and received some funding and support from a foundation that's funded by billionaires. I've been in the room with some wealthy. I remember when I was working for the Boys and Girls Club, and they had the steak and burger dinner, which was their yearly mega fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club. And they would have these wealthy white people come and eat burgers, and they would have poor inner city kids come and eat steaks. And it was in this elaborate ballroom in this hotel, this expensive hotel, and all these poor and inner city and urban and these poor activists trying to get some resources to bring back to the community had to go hobnob with these rich racist snobs. All that to say is there's a lot of strange bedfellows. Noam, the CIA. See, Prester just be saying wild shit. I think you're an agent, Prester. You always saying some contrarian shit. So I don't think anything of him being on there. I know Chris Tucker and celebrities. It's kind of like people say, well, Trump is, how can Trump be racist? He has pictures with Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. You know, there's a lot of strange fellows in that elite circle. So me personally, if I see a name on there, and besides, you know, rubbing elbows with the rich elites, and if you know anything about MIT is an institution funded by the government and the CIA. A lot of dark money goes into MIT, and a lot of dark technology comes out. And the corporate funders and government funders are MIT, and Noam Chomsky is probably the most prominent scholar coming out of MIT. So I know Noam Chomsky has been in the room and rubbed elbows with some pretty insidious people. So that alone is not, I don't know. I don't think it's not a good look. Me personally, if I know somebody's shitty, I'm not going to be standing cheek to cheek with them or kicking it with them. But what do you know? Look into them all. And if you find evidence, prosecute. Expose them. That's my thought, my final thought. And I guess what a horrible thing to end on. Whoever sent that. Yeah. Rich people in general. Rich white folks especially. Anyway, not that I'm defending. I've read many of Chomsky's books. I can't say I read them all, but I've read a lot of Chomsky's books, and there are some quality books, many Chomsky books that are Understanding Power. I was just reviewing some passages from Understanding Power for a discussion I had with Skip. So anyway, irregardless, get your Chomsky books, read up on Chomsky. That's it. I hate that I close with that. I wish I had something better to close with than try to make excuses for potential PDF. But that's not. That's why I need to stop. Okay. I'll do this. I can't. The answer to that is no. That's the short answer. Probably yes in some instances, but I don't know enough. If I knew that, if there was a way, I'd be up. The short answer is no. No, I haven't. That's another no. No, have I ever thought of writing revolutionary things? I develop a lot of revolutionary stories in my head, but I never write them down. I'm a horrible person. Okay, good night. On that night, no, I'll see y'all next Monday.